Hey everyone, it's Marvin. Thanks so much for listening to Books and Boba. I just wanted to take a quick second to remind you that Books and Boba just launched our Patreon to help support our future endeavors. Rira and I have been running Books and Boba for the last 6.5 years, and we've always talked about wanting to do more, including expanding our content offerings, being able to go to book events and do more coverage. And so to help us get closer to those ambitions, we started a Patreon to help us grow and to better support books by Asian and Asian American authors. We are offering 2 tiers for our Patreon. The first is our regular Boba member coming in at $3 a month, which will give you access to our brand new Books and Boba Discord server so you can engage with your fellow Books and Boba Club members and also Rira and myself in real time. This is where we'll be aiming to move the bulk of our book club discussions, but rest assured we'll still have a presence on Goodreads as well. And our premium tier is our Honey Boba member tier coming in at $5 a month, where in addition to access to our Discord server, you'll also get access to our monthly Boba Chats, a bonus podcast where Rira and I and some guests will get together each month and have a more casual discussion on stuff that may or may not be book related, as well as answer some listener Q&A. Honey Boba members will also have access to a poll to help decide an official Books and Boba book pick once per quarter. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, support Books and Boba on Patreon by going to patreon.com/booksandboba. As always, Rira and I really appreciate your support. All right, thanks for listening, and I'm on with the show.
You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
And hey, welcome to Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin Yeh.
And I'm Rira Yu.
And on this episode, we have an author interview with Sonya Lalli, the author of the book Serena Singh Flips the Script. We had a really great conversation with her about her book, about her journey as an author, and about representation in the page and media. Rira, what's Serena Singh Flips the Script about?
So Serena Singh Flips the Script is about a smart, confident, and just pretty much a kick-ass Indian American woman in her mid-30s who is at the top of her advertising firm in Washington, D.C. After her sister gets married and, is about to have a kid, she realizes that she doesn't really have that many friends anymore because her best friend was her sister. And now she believes that her sister won't have time for her because she's pregnant and becoming prepared for a family life. So this book is mostly about learning to make friends in your adulthood, the struggles that come with it, and the difficulties of sustaining old friendships and old relationships. So it's more about, I would say it's like more of a friend rom-com. Like, have you seen the movie I Love You, Man?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, where it not a bromance, but what would you call it? Like a
what
is equivalent to a bromance?
It's I don't know, a friend com. It's a friend
com.
Yeah. It's as someone who is in their late 30s and no longer has the benefit of like school or grad school or clubs to make friends. I totally relate to this premise because I feel like, especially in this age of COVID, I haven't really even talked to some of my old friends in a long time. So I'm sure there's been other books with this premise, but I just love it so much. It's so relatable,
Especially now, like you said, because of COVID, it's so hard to maintain friendships, right? People you used to see every day in person, now they're just pixels on a screen, and it's easy to just shut them out. So yeah, it's definitely a relatable theme, making new friends and learning how to keep old ones in your 30s.
Yeah, so coming up is our conversation with Sonya Lalli. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. Hey, it's Marvin. If you're like me, being cooped up indoors for almost a year, you've been snacking a lot. And while I enjoy the snacks I get at the local supermarket, sometimes I just really crave some Asian snacks. That's why I'm super excited that Irvin's salted egg chips are now available in the US. In case you haven't heard of Irvin's before, they are Singapore's #1 snack. Made with real salted duck egg that's been brined for 30 days, then steam cooked and hand mixed into the chips. And on top of that, they're also seasoned with real salted duck egg yolks, fresh curry leaves, and red pepper diced right into the bag. Their chips also have a spicy variant that really does bring the heat, believe me. I've been hooked on Irvin's ever since I discovered their booth at Taipei 101 a couple years ago, and there hasn't been a trip to Taiwan where I haven't brought at least 1 or 2 bags back with me, smuggled in my suitcase. But those days are over now that Irvin's is available in the States. You can order yourself some Irvin's salted egg chips by going to the website eatirvins.com. That's eatirvins.com, and use the promo code Books and Boba, all caps, for free shipping on any order. The website again is eatirvins.com, and the promo code for free shipping is Books and Boba, all caps. And we're here with author Sonya Lalli, the author of the book Serena Singh Flips the Script, which just came out last week. Welcome to the show, Sonya.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. We've talked to so many Asian authors, and it's always amazing to hear how everyone's path to becoming an author is so different.
I just wanted to also add, for a lot of Asian American authors and Asian diasporan authors, they don't discover that being an author is an occupation. They don't know that it's a job, that it's an actual career path for them. So when did you realize that being an author was possible?
Yeah, so that's a good point, and one that is definitely true in my case. So I think with a lot of with immigrant parents, regardless of where they came from, like when you come to a new country, there's this craving for security and building up the family and power and status and all these and things to make a life in a new country. So I mean, often career paths are very much you need to be a doctor or an accountant or a lawyer, things that are very defined and very stable and will guarantee an income to make your family get them what they want. So that's definitely how my parents brought me up too. And it wasn't malicious by any means. It was just sort of, they want what's best for me. And they understand that these career paths will get me security. So that's what they want for me. So yeah, I grew up always loving reading and writing, not really understanding that writing and working in publishing, which I also do, is a possible career path. I went to law school in my hometown of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I live in Canada. And I went on and worked for a year. And after that, I was 25 and I kind of didn't feel like I was ready to just, work in the same office the rest of my life. I had done things very quickly and very straight and narrow. And I kind of sold the idea of moving to the UK and pursuing a writing and publishing program as kind of a gap year for my parents. I kind of said, okay, you know what? I've done sort of the right thing, and now I want to try something else for a year. And that's how I sold it to them. And they were very supportive. They also were always very supportive of my writing aspirations. I think they understood that I did have something to fall back on, which I think helped garner their support. Anyways, I moved to the UK and I did this 1-year writing and publishing program. So half the classes were to sort of help me develop my writing skills. And that's when I wrote my first book. And the other part was to set me up with some skills to actually work in the publishing field. And so, yeah, that's how I sort of got to that place. And then I ended up staying on in the UK for 2 more years and working at a legal publisher during the day. And during my free time, I would work on my book. And I went through that whole process of trying to find an agent and then a publisher. So that's kind of how it happened.
Yeah, it's always great to have that game plan when you approach Asian parents about creative careers. I have a backup. If needed, we can get a real job. but
a real job, quote unquote, for sure.
There's definitely not a trend, but there's definitely a club for Asian diasporan writers who went to law school or worked as lawyers, and then they decided to pivot into becoming writers. It's something that we've noticed as we've interviewed other authors on this podcast, and I find that like really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think law for me was, I was never really good or that interested in science and math. I mean, I did it, but it wasn't natural to me. And so law I think law is sort of the field that a lot of creative people and people who like writing and critical thinking, they gravitate to that sort of field. Maybe that's one reason. I know that's why I chose law versus sort of a different career path.
You've spoken a lot about your own multicultural background and feeling the pressure of representation, feeling rep sweats about whether you're representing your communities well. And, it's become a talking point for Asian American representation that Asia is not a monolith. There's lots of different kinds of Asians, and you yourself have a mixed heritage even within, the Desi diaspora. Now that you've released your third novel, has your relationship with your own heritage and representation, has that developed at all?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I wrote the Matchmakers List, I for sure didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, I guess I was trying to figure it out as I went along. And when I wrote that book 7 years ago, I didn't really understand like how I felt about myself. I think a lot of us grew up just sort of accepting that we're not really in media, we're not really in books, or we're not represented. And so when I wrote the Matchmakers List, I kind of understood that I was doing something that was kind of new, and I did feel the burden to be like, okay, there aren't really that many rom-coms with a South Asian lead. Like, how are people going to feel about this? I definitely have more confidence that I don't need to write to everyone's experience because there is more representation. Obviously, there's a really long way to go, but there is more representation, and there should be more representation because that's the only way that we're actually going to have everybody's experiences and looks and background sort of reflected in culture. So yeah, I think more confidence to just sort of write what I know. I am, my mom's side of the family is Bengali, and they're Hindu. My dad's side of the family is Punjabi, and they're Sikh. And I grew up very much both in equal measure. And I've sort of picked different parts of myself and my background to sort of express and elaborate on in each of my books. And then maybe one day I will write a book that sort of represents exactly who I am in this mixed way, but I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's impossible to write every experience, right? Because like Marvin said, it's not a monolith. And the thing is, like, when people think brown women and romantic comedy, immediately their thought goes to Bollywood or arranged marriage. There's this stereotype that that's the only thing that romance writers can write about. And these stereotypes, I mean, they're very much stereotypes, but they come from truth. They come from an actual, I guess, cultural root. And I just wanted to ask, like, because your first novel, it has to do with matchmaking. And did you feel any conflict in terms of like playing into a stereotype or writing something that people would think would be a stereotype?
Yeah, I mean, I felt a little bit weird about it for two reasons. One is that some of the publicity questions I got were sort of like, why is arranged marriage so common? Or, they were asking me questions like, not why do you think, but asking me to answer for like an entire population of, why we have arranged marriage or why some communities do. Yeah, I mean, you're right that it does come from somewhere. Arranged marriage does exist, right? Like it's true for so many people I know from my grandparents. And we can't, like, it's not good to talk about it in a stereotypical way, but that doesn't mean that doesn't happen. Like your stereotypes have a grain of truth to them, and that we just need to make sure that the stereotypes aren't the only thing about our culture and about our love life that are portrayed.
All right, let's talk about your newest novel, Serena Singh Flips the Script, which just released last week. Congratulations, by the way. I know.
Oh, thank you.
I feel like releasing a book during COVID it makes an already tough endeavor even tougher. But congrats on your third book.
Thank you.
Can you let our listeners know what your story is about?
Yeah. So for Serena Singh Flips the Script, it started out for me as writing a romantic comedy about finding your new best friend. I wanted to flip the script, so to speak, on this idea that romantic comedies need to be about romantic relationships. I am in my 30s. I'm moving to a new city. I found that it was pretty hard to make new, genuine friendships. Everyone's so busy. Everyone already has their friends. And so I wanted to talk about how it was really like dating. If you want to find someone new in your life when you're older, a new good friend, you kind of have to put in the work. You kind of have to put in a lot of work to form and cement a good friendship, and how much work that is. The other thing that I wanted to think about in that book was the idea that we need to find a partner and we need to get married and have children in order to have our happily ever after. Because that's not true. And in my first two books, I had leading women who did want marriage and did want children. And I thought it would be really good to talk about a woman who has focused on her career, has no regrets about not getting married and about not having children, and is still very happy with her own life, or thinks she's very happy with her own life. So I wanted to talk about that stereotype and that cultural expectation that we need to get married and have children to have domestic bliss.
Yeah, I think for a lot of women past a certain age, good news or happiness is equal to having children or getting married. And you have to be very careful because, if your friends, if most of them are married and they have children, and you say, hey, I have good news, and the good news is being promoted or some other professional accomplishment, people just automatically assume that, you either got married or are pregnant.
Totally. And I've actually had that exact same experience because, the year before the Matchmakers list came out in North America, I was planning my wedding, and I kept having like these really great things happening with my book, and everybody just wanted to talk about my wedding.
The wedding. And
I was like, I'm sorry, I love my now husband, but I am way more excited about this book, right? This professional thing. And even now, I've been married a couple of years, and anytime that I have to tell somebody news, I can't be ambiguous at the start. I can't be like, hey, guess what? Like you said, I have to like very quickly jump to the news. Otherwise people think that I'm announcing my pregnancy when, and it's really frustrating to have that expectation on you and to assume that, that's the only thing on my mind, or that a woman in her 30s who does not have a family, that it's a default, that it's happened by default, and that's not an active choice. And so I really wanted to sort of look at these expectations in the book.
Yeah, don't people know that you can be just as happy for your professional baby than an actual baby?
The answer is no, Marvin. people don't know that. I love the fact that your characters, not just in this book, but in your previous two book, Matchmaker's List and Grown Up Pose, your women are older. You have a 29-year-old, and you also have someone who is a young mom in their 30s, and Serena is 36, I believe. In this book. And I don't know why, maybe it's because I have my reading scope, like my horizons need to be expanded, but I haven't read that many books where the main character is a woman who is in their 30s. I feel like society and also literature, they like to perpetuate this myth that by the time you're 30, you're done growing up. And that is so far from the truth, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm almost 32, and I don't feel like I'm a grown up yet. I think that I think it's good to have books and literature that reflect all ages and all situations. This idea that we once we're done college and we've been working for years, we need to get married is just preposterous. Actually, the whole reason I had the idea of the matchmakers list initially was because I remember it being summer and it was wedding season, and I was going to a bunch of big facey weddings, and I was working, and I just finished law school, and I remember like getting some looks and some questions to my family, and like, this is the thing that I need to think about now. And it just really, I have come from a very progressive community, but I still felt it happening. And I really sort of pushed back against it.
32 is very young, by the way.
It is. It's all perspective.
I mean, like when we're younger, we're like, oh, 30, that's like ancient. Like, I can never be 30 years old. But as you get older, 30, 32, 36 is not even that old.
Totally.
I mean, I'm almost 37, and everyone is young now. I'm to the point where I'm just an old man.
Everyone is kids these days.
I know. It's bad.
Totally. Yeah. I feel really young, but then I sort of try and understand some of these trends from the next generation, and I'm not following, and I'm like, oh my God, maybe I am a little bit old.
It's like, oh God, what is TikTok? How do I use it?
Exactly. I'm not on TikTok, but maybe I should be.
So we just talked about like how we're not done growing up by the time we're 30, and you talked about how hard it is to find new people when you move to a new city, for example. And Serena goes through that same struggle. She tries to make new friends through an app, through mixers, a book club, a cooking class, and all of these end in complete disaster. I mean, they're hilarious. Were any of those episodes based on real life? And if not, what is the most awkward adult friendship activity you've had to endure?
Oh, that's a good question. I exaggerated everything in the book. Luckily, I didn't have any of those exact experiences. I have gone to a book club meeting where nobody knew each other. And it really, I'm trying to describe a way to feel like, it just felt like it was just the most awkward experience I've had, because I felt like we were all there to make friends, but everybody was too nervous to talk to each other, at least the people sitting right in my area. And once you sit down at one of these things, it's not like you can go and be like, actually, I'm going to go sit over there. Cause this, that's just kind of rude, right? Like I'd rather just not make any friends than be rude to like nice, quiet strangers. So that was actually pretty awkward.
I mean, now that you're an author, I'm just like thinking about that situation where you go and you say, and someone says, I don't like your book. And that's just really awkward. I hope that never happens to you. I hope you're not invited to a book club and someone says that they don't like your book.
Oh, thank you. I mean, they're totally within their right, but maybe I'll just come for half the book club. And after I leave, people who don't like it can talk about it.
Yeah. So why do you think that it's so hard for people in their 30s to make new friends, right? Because, we're supposed to have developed our social skills by them, supposed to being the key word.
Yeah. Well, I think when you're younger, like people in your class, for example, in school, you just spend so much time to each other that even if you don't have a lot in common, you just spend so much time with each other. It's you gain so many experiences together, and these sort of form this great basis for friendship. Same with, in university, and also same with, starting maybe at a new job where there's lots of young people and you just work together all the time and naturally become friends. But creating a friendship out of thin air with someone who you might only meet at a yoga class or at a book club, you sort of have this sort of one-off encounter. And even if there's chemistry and even if you hit it off, it takes effort to sort of exchange phone numbers, follow up, organize another meeting. And then even that meeting, you still don't know each other that well. You've only met for an hour. And that second meeting, again, requires a lot of effort to build even more and then organize a third meeting. So it just takes way more effort to even get to a place where you can feel familiar and comfortable with someone. And it's way easier to just go back to to just hang out with the friends you already have, or with your partner, or with your family, rather than put in the effort to find new people to have this connection with. So in the book, Serena is finding that she doesn't actually have any strong connections that she can rely on anymore, because one, her little sister is married and now pregnant, and Serena thinks that she's too busy for her. And Serena's 36, and a lot of her friends have chosen conventional paths and are busy with their families and their jobs and their partners and don't have a lot of time for Serena, or at least that's how Serena perceives it. So it's only at this point, when she can't fall back on these other easier long-term friendships, that she realizes she needs to actually put in the work to find some new ones.
Yeah, that effort it's hard, but it's not impossible. I feel like it's a good thing this book didn't take place during the COVID lockdown, because I feel like this past year I've become so just bad at keeping in touch with people. I just want to post up in my room and just not socialize at all.
Definitely, especially in the spring. I mean, there was, my groups of friends where the silver lining was that at least at the beginning, people were putting in my group more effort to do Zoom calls and Jackbox games and things like that, which was great, because a lot of my close friendships from when I was younger they were in different cities, and I wouldn't have otherwise spent that time with them. But yeah, it can be, especially this has been going on for a year. We don't do that anymore. It becomes this new routine again so quickly.
Yeah, no, totally. Same with us.
Yeah, I mean, there's a quote in your book that just sums up that effort really well. I'm just going to read it. Not every friendship or relationship, family or otherwise, could be a two-way street. With some, you took more than you gave, and with others, well, they got your heart and your soul, and you picked up whatever scraps you could find. And I think that is so true. Not all relationships will be will be equal. You will have to compromise. Every relationship is a compromise, and you have to decide what is enough for you. But speaking of friendships, I wanted to talk more about Ainsley. She's such a firecracker, and really, I think she's the real love interest in this book. So can you talk a little bit more about how you developed Ainsley as a character and how you made her compatible with Serena?
Well, one of the motivations in developing that relationship was that I wanted them to be real with each other and to be the ones who can call out each other's prejudices and each other's flaws and sort of have that honesty with each other. So Serena is really judgy about married women with children. She kind of writes them off as soon as her friends have gotten married and had kids, because she just assumes that they're not going to have anything in common anymore, and those women aren't going to be interested in Serena's life anymore. And while that's happened a little bit, like she completely writes off Ainsley when she first meets her, and Ainsley invites her to a drink, and Serena says no because she just assumes that this is going to be like whatever. Ainsley's not real friend potential; she's a mom, right? Similarly, Ainsley is a woman who has been divorced. She's now married to an Indian guy with a very traditional father-in-law who doesn't approve of Ainsley, and they have a small child, and Ainsley's trying to learn Punjabi, and she really has conflicting feelings of trying to impress her in-laws, and Serena calls her out and says, why are you trying to, you're so cool, you're so independent, you don't let anyone tell you what to do. Why are you doing things to please your father-in-law? Why are you bending over backwards? And so this honesty was always a thread in building up to the fight that they have later in the book, that sort of tests them. The other thing about them is that Serena is really, she's really fun, and she really likes playful people. Both of Serena's love interests in the book are quite fun and playful. And I thought that it was important to have, her friends also sort of be that type of person who can, you can be serious with, but you also just have a lot of fun together.
I just want to say I mispronounced Ainsley's name.
Oh no, that's okay. I hope I didn't mispronounce Ainsley's name.
It's a thing with reading books, right? Because if you're not listening to the audiobook, you just have to go with whatever pronunciation you come up with when you're reading to yourself. Yeah, I mean, Harry Potter, I thought Hermione was Hermione for the longest time until the movie came out.
I thought it was Hermione too. I don't think that's a common name in North America. Is that why?
Definitely not. I've never met one in real life. So
yeah, me neither.
It's not just Asian names that are hard to pronounce.
Totally.
Scottish names, British names, yeah, like everybody's names can be difficult.
For sure.
So you feature interracial couples in this book. I mean, Serena and Beckett, who is East Asian, I'm guessing. That's what I got from the book. Okay, great. I was paying attention. Natasha and Mark who's white, and then, like you said, Ainsley and Nikesh, who is of Indian descent. Did you always intend to have so many interracial couples?
Yeah, I think that's not something I plan. It's just sort of a reflection of what I experience. In my previous books, the main characters their love interests were also of Indian descent or white. They've had friends who had Black love interests, Asian love interests. It just sort of, I think that there is, and I think this is sort of becoming more talked about, is that interracial couples, the default is white and something else. And while, maybe in my experience, that is a common match, it's not always the case. And so while initially I didn't think about it too hard, now when I write, I do think about interracial characters more, interracial relationships more critically before I put it into the book, because I do want to sort of represent the reality of what is happening.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the whole if it's an interracial relationship, the other party is going to be white, and that's the default. I say this as someone who is dating a white guy.
Yeah, my husband is white as well.
Yeah. And of course, and that's like a whole different can of worms with like Asian women dating white guys and what our community has to say about that. But I'm not going to get into that. That requires like another hour of discussion. But I did want to talk briefly about Serena's mother, Sandeep. Some of the chapters are in her perspective, and I just wanted to ask, like, why you decided to include those chapters and not just write it from Serena's perspective the entire time.
Well, Serena is very, especially at the beginning of the book, she's quite judgmental. She's very harsh with her parents. She barely talks to her dad. She's very short with her mom. I think there was a lot of room to interpret Serena as not a great daughter if we didn't see the other perspective. Sandeep's those chapters weren't. They weren't in my first draft. My editor, back and forth with her, she actually suggested it, and it allowed the mother to become a more complex character too. Serena has also she has a lot of strong judgments against her mother's decisions, because her mother is a very typical, traditional Punjabi wife and mother, right? And so having Sandeep's perspective paints her as a more complicated woman for making the choices she's made. And it also allows readers to see that Serena actually, in her way, in a very different way than her sister, is a good daughter. And she is trying her best. And she does have very, very good reasons for having the judgments that she has.
Yeah, it's always great to see the parent characters fleshed out that way, because we grew up in a culture that's so different than what our parents grew up with. In our minds, our parents are stuck in their old ways, when in reality, they also have their own struggles for being people who literally went to a different country to try to make it.
Yeah, totally. And it, I mean, I think there's something in the book. One of the characters says, like, do we ever really know our mother or our daughter? And in a way, especially when there's that cultural and generational divide in the home, it can be hard to see where the other person is coming from. And, largely parents just want what's best for their kids, right? But with a different background and different values, their idea of best, of a good life and a happy life, is very, very different often than how we think we'll be happy.
Yeah. I think personally, I found that as I've gotten older, they're not as different as we think they are. It's just a matter of perspective.
I think it's mainly communication, right? Because it's like they understand, but how do they relay that message? Saying like, "Hey, like we come from different times and cultures, but I understand like what you want." And sometimes like the kid will take things the wrong way, because obviously sometimes the language, for some immigrant kids, they're the ones who kind of had to be the parent when they came to the country. Like they had to translate for their parents. And a lot of the time, like the parents are learning about the culture through their kid. So the kid is pretty much being the teacher. So how do you, that dynamic is, it's very unique to the immigrant experience, because you're not going to get that if your parent and the child grew up in the same country, the same community, and whatnot.
Totally. Yeah. I had a very like halfway between, I don't know if I'm technically second or third generation. My parents were both born in India, but they were raised as, they came over as children to Canada. So while they are very Indian in some ways, they're very Canadian in other ways. So I never had to translate for them, but I know that they would have had to do that for their mothers.
Yeah, I guess that would be what, 2.5?
Yeah, 2.5.
We're doing math, right? 2.5.
I don't know. Everybody has a different definition, different number for it.
Yeah. So your book came out last week. Again, congratulations. How has it been releasing a book during during
Yeah,
COVID?
I mean, it's not ideal, but it is what it is. We've had a year now to get used to it. Actually, my second book, Grown Up Pose, came out March 2020. So that was, that was not great. But you know what? At the time, the world was, it was just too overwhelming what was happening in the world that it felt kind of trivial to be worrying about my book at that time. But I think that we've had time to get used to it. This is just the new normal. And for at least the next months or while, we're still going to be living like this. And so I think I had my expectations in check. Everything's going to be virtual rather than in person. More things will be digital rather than physical. And it's been really great. I really love my publisher. I love my editor. I have a great sort of group of people to celebrate. So it's been really wonderful.
I'm really thankful for books like yours, because during a time when it is very overwhelming and we don't know what to expect in the near future, it's nice to read light books. It's nice to read books where not everything is the end of the world.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like romance novels and light contemporary novels, they get a bad rep from a lot of readers, because they're like, oh, it's not considered serious, it's not literary enough. But the truth is, a lot of people read romance novels this year for the first time because they needed that escape.
Totally, yeah. And I hope that is changing. I mean, I read across the board. I love me a good serious literary book, but I also love me a good romance, right? So it just depends on the day, the mood, a lot of factors. And I'm maybe this past year has sort of encouraged some people to go broader.
Yeah. I mean, we always complain about not enough representation on the screen, but there's tons of representation on the page these days. And, we've been covering Asian American authors for almost, 5 years now. And there's just so much content on there, so many stories. And whenever we read a book that is a lighter, not as serious, but still a lot of fun, I always find myself really, really satisfied with just reading a fun story about, people in love or people trying to deal with their lives.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that, especially as there's more and more out there, like an Asian author doesn't have to always write about being Asian or the trauma that they've experienced as an Asian or these very heavy things. It can just be an Asian main character who is going about their life, and yes, there are certain things about their life that, because of who they are more Asian, but love is universal. Job and career and existential crises are they're universal. So I'm glad to see that there are more stories that don't have to be so yes, I'm Asian, but my story doesn't have to be just about being Asian.
I mean, how do you write a book that's just about being Asian? Because it's not textbook. And like we said before, the Asian diasporan experience, it's not a monolith. Certainly not even within a very specific subcategory like Indian diaspora, because India itself is so diverse. You have so many different dialects, so many different religions as well. So to just box it all into one category, it's impossible.
For sure, yeah.
Was that a struggle for you when you were writing your first few books to impress those differences to your publisher, to your editors?
No, I mean, I had a really good publishing experience with Berkeley and with my editor. I think that they understood, who I was and what I was trying to write. And they have a very, very good diverse list with of authors, even amongst South Asian authors in particular. And my books are, or what I strive to write are just books about, flawed, strong women of South Asian heritage who are just figuring out their life and falling in love. And all of this is informed by the fact that they, of course, grew up in Indian households and the expectations that came with that, and just balancing that as they try and live their lives. And so it wasn't something that I actively thought about. That's how I live my life, and I wrote my characters how I live my life, and my publisher liked it. Yeah.
It was part of your life, so of course it would be natural to write it.
All right, we're coming up to the end of our time with you, Sonya. Rira, do you have any final questions?
Yeah. So your first book, you had a character who was single and, kind of wanted to change that. You had a second book that was about a young mother. And then this book was about a woman who didn't want to get married, didn't want to have kids, that done deal. Do you have another book in the works with another strong brown female character? And what path are they walking in their current stage of life?
So I wrote a book that has actually been moved up, and it's coming out this October to come out in time for Diwali, because the book is called A Holly Jolly Diwali. And, there's so many Christmas romances out there. I wanted to write a seasonal romance that wasn't just about Christmas. It's about, a North American girl like me, South Asian, who celebrates Diwali and Christmas. So that's the theme of the book. And as far as her journey, she's a little bit younger than my other characters. I think I have her in her late 20s. And she has always sort of done the right thing. She chose a stable career. She lives with her parents. She has a very rebellious older sister. And so she has always been the one who's had to be the good Indian girl at home to sort of counterbalance her sister. And so her journey in this book is for the first time going on an impulsive decision of going on a holiday and falling in love with a guy she doesn't think her parents will necessarily approve of, and sort of it's more leaning into the romance side of things. I write romance and women's fiction. The last 2 books of mine have been more women's fiction, and this one is sort of veering back towards the romance end.
I love the fact that it's seasonal. Yeah, like Christmas is like when you go on like Netflix, for example, around Christmas, it's just like a never-ending list. So I'm really glad that we're getting more diversity on that front. So I'm really excited to read it.
Thanks. Yeah, I would love more seasonal. Christmas/Lunar New Year holiday romance would be great. Like all sorts
Hanukkah
of
romance.
Hanukkah romance. I mean, there might be some, I don't know any, but like, yeah, just more fun holiday romances that are sort of lots of different holidays.
Yeah. Serena Singh Flips the Script is available now on booksellers everywhere. We've been talking to the author, Sonya Lalli. Thank you so much for joining us on Books and Boba. I guess, do you have any social media handles that you want to share if people want to follow your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and my handle is Sonya, SONYA _Lalli, LALLI for both of them.
Awesome. Well, Sonya, thank you so much once again for joining us to chat about your book. Good luck with the rest of your book tour. And yeah, wish you all the best.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much. And that was our interview with Sonya Lalli. Her book, Serena Singh Flips the Script, is available now on bookstores everywhere. So please check it out. Thank you once again to Sonya for chatting with us. All right, so Rira, remind us what our book club pick is for this month.
We are reading Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Enyan. And it is a YA fantasy romance featuring girls who have magical powers, and there are certain castes. There's a social hierarchy depending on what power you have, and a lot of these girls are sent to the palace to woo the king and hopefully become the king's consort. That is what I have been told. But of course, we have not read the book, so it might be different from what we have heard about the book. So I have no trigger warnings at this time. Just approach with caution, as always.
Yeah, I mean, harem politics is very much a staple in at least East Asian fiction, right? Especially when you deal with emperors and such. So yeah, looking forward to chatting about this book at the end of the month. A quick reminder that you can support Books and Boba by purchasing books on our bookshop portal. Go to bookshop.org/shop/booksandboba, and on there you'll see a ton of curated lists curated by Rira of books by Asian American authors. All purchases on this platform goes to support local bookstores as well as this podcast. So yeah, thank you to everyone who's already bought a book on our bookshop. And yeah, that's our episode. Thanks again for listening to Books and Boba. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Books and Boba. This podcast was hosted by Marvin Yue and Rira Yu and edited and produced by Marvin Yue. Follow the book club on Twitter and Instagram by going to @BooksandBoba and engage with us on Goodreads on our Goodreads group. You can also check out past episodes of the podcast by going to booksandboba.com and by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget, you can support Books and Boba and Asian American authors by purchasing books at our bookshop.org account. Check out the link in our show notes and also at booksandboba.com. Books and Boba is a proud member of the Potluck Podcast Collective, a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts featuring unique voices and stories from the Asian diaspora. Learn more about the collective and check out our fellow Potluck shows by visiting the website podcastpotluck.com. Thanks for listening.
Kathy? Kim?
Steve? Where have you been? We haven't seen you for 7 years.
Has it been that long?
Uh-huh.
Oh. I was on a fishing boat. training. It's part of the plan.
What training? What plan?
The third season of the Korean drama podcast!
Okay, we're doing this again? Okay, but there's no body switching in this one, right?
No! The only thing we're switching is the fact that we're going to watch a good drama this time. From 2020 called Itaewon Class! A story about starting a restaurant and a dish that Koreans love called revenge.
I thought you were going to say kimchi jjigae.
I thought you were going to say juke.
Those two. Koreans love those two.
Listen to the Korean Drama Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Part of the Potluck Podcast Collective.